Hey Martin, so I would love for us to talk about something that I see quite often with leaders is there is a mentality shift around that some leaders don't have around where they're at and how empowered they are to essentially play a bigger game. So what I mean by that is if you imagine if you take a junior employee, they tend to have the mentality of there's this task that I've been given and I just do the task, right? I've been given something to do and I do it. And that's the kind of field that they're playing in. And then as there are promotions and promotions and promotions, and people get to a more senior level, what can happen is that that doesn't disappear, yet there are hundreds of people sometimes reporting into them. And so I'll articulate this with a real example. A client I was working with who was having a really, really difficult time with his manager. And at this point, he's the chief of staff of a large organization. And what was essentially happening was that because his manager was a bit of a loose cannon and had a lot of whims that she would follow and things that like, priorities would change based on her emotions in the moment and things would kind of shift. The goalposts would shift very regularly. My client was having a really hard time with that because that was rippling, kind of trickling down to him. And then he was then, the best that he knew how to do was to then let that trickle down to his large team. Because if the priority is somehow immediately different, then I guess we have to work on different things, and I have to, I have to tell my team that they're working on something different. And that was really frustrating for him to always feel like he was at the whim of his manager. And what I really found happened there, which can be quite common, is that he was a senior leader operating as though he was a junior. And the missing link there, so it seemed, was that the realization of how much more he had available to him now, how much more empowered he was now to actually make a difference and to manage upwards and to create a buffer and a barrier and a supportive network within him and his team, which he really wanted to do, without having to simply follow call and response, call and response. Does the challenge make sense? And I would love to hear what you think of it.
So I'm just trying to capture what the real problem is. The real problem feels like hierarchy, stuck in hierarchy. And the other thing that was occurring to me was the parent-child model, really, is like in a classic hierarchy, we're stuck with the parent making the decisions above us and us being the child. And sometimes the leader above takes the parental role, uh, forcing us to be the child and to do as we're told. Or the other way round, we just naturally assume that because of the hierarchy that we've grown up in our society, which we know doesn't work very well, but we don't then fully empower ourselves even when we're in a senior level because of this model and this way of thinking.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of describing it. And I think when you were talking about that scenario where there's a kind of parent role being taken by the manager, what I think is really cool to look at is, well, does that require you to take the child role? And for a lot of people, it feels like there's that I'm then forced to behave in this way. And what was really fun to explore with this client was, what if that's not true?
Yes.
What if there's more available to me here than just pandering in a way that, like you say, I've only ever known how to do that.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, that's the role of stepping up, right? That's the role of being a leader at any level in any organization is how do we step up and be adult in our way of thinking and our decisions and our behaviors. And really the whole hierarchical model of an organization um, should really be forgotten about, because in the way that we think and behave, because the leaders above us don't really want us to do as we're told. They want an organization full of people thinking freely and maturely for the good of the organization. So the only thing that really is stopping your client, the chief of staff client you mentioned, really is his own thinking. And so how does he start to step up and challenge when he doesn't agree, and use his time not according to people filling up his diary, but use his, like, own his diary and start to set boundaries for when he goes home and when he works and when he doesn't. And there's all these examples I can think of like that, where people are giving away their power and they need to get their power back. And we need a world full of leaders at every level, of people who are um, consciously living and leading their lives and their work.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there that there is a power. We all have that power, and only some of us are utilizing it. And so that's the challenge here, is being like, okay, what is the power that I have in this situation? And seeing that actually when I step into my power, and often when you talk about shifts in thinking and kind of those misunderstandings, it's like actually really seeing that there's a reason I'm here. There's a reason I made it to chief of staff, right? And so it's like if you're really seeing the value that you do have, then it starts to become more obvious. It starts to become a more logical thing to do, to utilize what makes reasonable sense to you, and to create, like, use that logic, whatever it is that is feels like it's working against you, or the places where you feel powerless. It's like there's more for you to see about your own value that you bring here, and let that boost you to actually making the decisions that feel right for you, rather than settling into that follower role.
Yeah, and this goes into deep sort of child development for me, which, like, the ego's worried that we're not enough, we're not good enough, we're not enough just the way that we are. And so it's easy to come into adult and into then roles and senior roles with some element of not lacking of confidence, or lacking of gravitas, or lacking of comfort with self, or being, like, to be inner guided is a big journey. And it comes from, yeah, this, like, are we good enough? Are we making the right decisions? Can we trust ourselves? Do we value ourselves? And for me, this is the point of coaching or any other sort of development, of which there's loads out there. It's like, how do we, stepping into our power is to start to love ourselves and value ourselves and be fully ourselves in this world.
And I think you just touched on something that is so important there when you said trusting ourselves. And that's you're absolutely bang on, that like we can rely on ourselves, and yet a lot of people don't, because of all these reasons that you just mentioned, or we don't in some situations. And really agree with you, this is the crux. This is really at the core of what coaching is it's helping you to see that you already have exactly what it is that you think that you need to go and get. And so
Yeah.
there's a level of trust that you can have for yourself. And following that is going to steer you in the right direction, more so than following any advice or tips or tricks that anybody else might have offered.
So is that I'm just trying to capture the message we want to leave for listeners. Is that it?
I think I think for me, there's two things we've touched on here which feel important. One is you are so much more powerful than you think you are. And tying into that is you have so much more within you. The answers that you're seeking, that's coming from within. You already have that. And there is a level of trust that you can develop with yourself, to consider that your instincts around things, your intuitions around things will guide you in the direction. Would you add anything to that?
Well, like in a way, that's all we've got. All I've got is my ideas, my thinking, my self-expression, my expertise, my experience. That's all I've got. And so my only job, and like for all of us, for everyone listening to this, and me and you, is like there's quite a lot in that. And the only job for us to do is to fully live into all that we are. Not to try to be what I'm not, but actually, if I just fully live into who I am, then actually that will that's taken care of everyone listening to this until this point. It's done them really well, actually. It's got them a long way. And it will get them a lot further the more powerfully they step into just the fullness of who they already are.
Beautiful.